And okay, good. I am involved with the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. I'm an advisor to their collections committee, and really excited to be part of this Genocide Awareness Week here in Phoenix. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. David Patterson, who holds the Hillel A. Feinberg Distinguished Chair in Holocaust Studies at the University of Texas at Dallas, and is a senior research fellow for the Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism and Policy. He has lectured at universities throughout the United States and abroad. He's the winner of the National Jewish Book Award and the Koret Jewish Book Award. He's published 40 books and more than 250 articles and essays on anti-Semitism and the Holocaust. His most recent books are Judaism, Anti-Semitism, Holocaust, Making the Connections, Shoah and Torah, and Portraits, Elie Wiesel's Hasidic Legacy. Please welcome Dr. Patterson.
Thanks so much. Thank you all for being here today. I'm going to talk about two things, basically. The singularity of the Shoah, its implications for humanity, and what it tells us about anti-Semitism, the essence of Nazi anti-Semitism. So what are they anti exactly? What are the Nazis trying to annihilate and remove from the world in the annihilation of the Jews? Why the Jews? Elie Wiesel once made this remark that the ultimate mystery of the Holocaust is that whatever happened took place in the soul. The Holocaust entails, among other things, a radical assault on the soul, on the meaning of the soul, on the meaning of words, on human relationship, on memory, testimony, everything that goes into our teaching and traditions. Now, how do we understand what's driving this? Again, what is the essence of Nazi anti-Semitism? There are many efforts to explain anti-Semitism, to explain what the Nazis are doing. It's another case of bigotry. They envy the Jews. I mean, who would envy the Jews? In any case, they envy the Jews for their prosperity, their success, their power, as they understand it, scapegoating, xenophobia. German Jews were not so xeno. German Jews were very much like the German non-Jews. They're classmates, business partners. They ate the same Wiener Schnitzel pretty much. They're not like the Ostjuden, right? The weird looking Polish Hasidic Jews. Or is it racism? Although these various phenomena come into the mix, in my view, I don't think anti-Semitism is reducible to any of these things. There's a scene in The Book Thief where, if you've seen The Book Thief, the film, it's not in the novel, but it's in the film, where Wiesel, the little girl staying with foster parents during the Third Reich period, sees the Gestapo haul off a Jewish shopkeeper. Her father says something, they knock him to the ground. She goes back home and down into the basement where they're hiding Max, a young Jewish guy. She asks him, why do they hate us? Why do they hate my father? Why do they hate the Jews? And he says, because we remind them of their humanity. Now, what exactly are we reminded of when we're reminded of our humanity, and why would we kill somebody for reminding us? Okay, so I think this is with the Jews. How do the Jews remind humanity, humans, of their humanity? And what does that mean? This is something that I will address. And what does the Shoah have to do with that? This is, as you can see, a metaphysical question. It's a question that entails understanding something about the holiness of the human being, and therefore something about the Holy One. The Holocaust has a metaphysical dimension in ways that other genocides perhaps do not have in such a direct way. And this is why naming it is an issue. In the last 20 years, at least 40 books have been written on Holocaust representation through art, literature, film, music. How do you represent it? Other atrocities don't have this body of literature regarding problems of representing that event. There's some, but not to this extent. August 1941, 2 months after the Einsatzgruppen went into action following the Wehrmacht to the east from June 22nd, 1941, killing every Jew they could find by the tens of thousands already. When word of this got back to London, Winston Churchill, on August 24th, 1941, said in a radio broadcast, "We are in the presence of a crime without a name." Naming it is a problem. Paul Celan, famous survivor, poet, referred to the event simply as Das, was geschah, that which happened. He had no name. He wouldn't name it. He wouldn't name it. Omar Bartov, in fact, has said that the multiplicity of names for the event is what he calls is the obverse side of God's multiplicity of names. God has 72 names. The Shoah, I don't know if it has 72 names, but it has many names. Why would Bartov make such a statement? I think in part, the problem of naming it is that in some sense, at the heart of it is an assault on the nameless one, on the ineffable name, on the Holy One. So how do we name it? Holocaust is a Greek word, as you know. It's a sacrificial offering by fire, where the offering is completely burned up. Fire is indeed a dominant image in this event. You may recall Madame Schechter in Elie Wiesel's Night, who has visions of fire as she's in the train. Shoah, a word that means annihilation, from shav, which is nothingness, like the English word annihilation, nihil. The Shoah or Holocaust is not a synonym for everything bad that happened in Europe between 1933 and 1945. It is the final solution to the Jewish problem, not the gypsy problem or the communist problem and so on. It's the Jewish problem. It's the Endlösung der Judenfrage, the Jewish question. And indeed, in German, you find this term referred to as die Judenvernichtung, the annihilation of the Jews, of everything that the Jews represent, everything that the Jews teach, every memory of the Jews. It's also known in Yiddish it's a Hebrew word, Korban, used in Yiddish. And I think this word is particularly telling because Korban means destruction, and it references the destruction of the two temples. Some refer to the Shoah as the third Korban. What is Korban? What is the significance of the destruction of the temple? Why is it so devastating? The destruction of the temple in Jewish tradition is the obliteration and the darkening of the light of the Holy One. We're taught in the Midrash that the windows of the temple were designed not to let light in, but to let light out. Okay. It's a removal of the divine presence from the world, therefore of holiness, meaning, human sanctity, teaching, tradition, memory, everything that goes with the divine presence. Okay. That's the devastation. And I think that's what comes under assault. And that's why it's so difficult to name. When the Eichmann trial was underway with Gideon Hausner as the prosecutor, Hausner went to Yechiel Dinor to ask him to testify. Dinor is the author known as Katsetnik 135633. Katsetnik means camp inmate. I have a whole other lecture on Katsetnik, on Dinor, but this is a famous moment in the Eichmann trial, session 68 on June 7th, 1961. You can see it. It's about 8 to 9 minutes on YouTube. When Dinor, after begging Hausner, don't call me to the stand, don't call me. I was there for 2 years. I saw the beating, I saw the starvation, I saw the brutality, I saw the burning, I saw all of it, but that's not Auschwitz. What it is, I can't say. So if you see here his testimony, he took the stand and he tries to, in his literary way, tries to say what planet Auschwitz is and what it's not. People there did not dress as you and I dress. They had no names. They did not bear children. They did not bury the dead. And at various intervals in the testimony, he uses the phrase, "Ani ma'amin be'emunah shlema," and I believe with complete faith that, you know, one day that this has to come to light and so on. But this, as you may know, it's a refrain from the 13 principles of Maimonides as part of the liturgy. Ani ma'amin be'emunah shlema, I believe with perfect faith. And it introduces a dimension of prayer to the testimony. So he's doing everything but give evidence. So finally, they ask him, you know, can you give evidence? And he collapsed. Dinor collapsed and was paralyzed for 6 weeks afterward. So where does this come from? How does this metaphysical dimension of the event that he saw with his eyes and he can't say what it is, how does that arise? It has a history. And over the years, I've realized in order to understand anything, you have to understand at least a little history. Anti-Semitism, Jew hatred, takes on a theological dimension that transcends ethnic animosity, bigotry, racism, scapegoating, economic envy, et cetera. Once the Jew becomes a theological category, the Jew is removed from the family of humanity, becomes an abstraction. John Chrysostom, for example, writes, what is the synagogue of the Jews who fight against God? It is the devil who leads them in their revels. So you have with the advent of the demonization of the Jew, you have the etherealization, or the Jew turned over to a mythic category. St. Jerome, the translator of the Vulgate, says the ceremonies of the Jews are pernicious and deadly. Whoever observes them falls into the pit of the devil. The ceremonies of the Jews, Pesach, Passover, Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks, Feast of Tabernacles, whoever participates in those festivals that Jesus participated in falls into the pit of the devil. St. Augustine, the other city has run its course, not in light, but in shadow. I mean, the Jewish covenant was always in the darkness. During the Crusades, once you have this demonization of the Jews, the Jews are not just evil, but the source of evil. It's not that all Jews are evil, but all evil is Jewish. And therefore, this hatred of the Jew takes on a redemptive dimension. And during the Crusades, there were priests who preached, particularly, in 1096, with the Rhineland massacres, anyone who kills a Jew will have his sins forgiven. The Christians were washed in the blood of one Jew to have their sins forgiven. Now it's the blood of other Jews. Again, because this is not just removing an infidel, it's removing evil, something satanic from the world. It's a religious duty, something holy and pleasing to God, you see. It's not an unpleasant necessity. It's a religious duty. So to get rid of the devil. And here you see the circle on this demon, this devil's clothing. It's a Jew badge. You see above this image is from 15th century, the blood libel, which is a reenactment of the killing of the Christ, which is a killing of God. Killing of the Jews will kill what is highest and most holy. They have to be removed. There were four major inquisitions: the medieval Inquisition, Spanish, Portuguese, and Roman Inquisition. Spanish, the purpose of all inquisitions is to root out heresy. In the case of Spanish and Portuguese inquisitions, the heresy was Judaizing. That's the heresy. And the heresy is in the blood. So you have the advent of what would prefigure other drives for purity, drives for rendering humanity Juden rein, purified of the Jews. Is this notion of limpieza de sangre, purity of blood, so that the conversos were always suspect. You say you embrace Jesus, but you still have that Jewish blood. The Judaism, the heresy here now is not on the lips or in the heart, but in the blood. It becomes, this is a move in this history of essentializing the Jew, which will come into play with the advent of modernity. So as modernity comes, things do not get any easier for the Jews. And part of what distinguishes modernity, I'm oversimplifying, but is this what I call a turn inward. You see this with the Protestant Reformation, Luther, repeating the basically a deicide charge. This turn inward comes with the sola fide, by faith alone. It's not the dispensation of the church, the sacraments of the church. That stuff won't save you. It's only this inner faith, sola fide, the inner movement in the heart and the soul, whatever, intellectually and in other ways. This turn inward comes with modern thinking, so that entails, at least for some thinkers, the ascendancy of the ego or the self, the autonomy of the self. Okay, Immanuel Kant says only he who is autonomous is free, and being autonomous means being self-legislating. So you have Kant calling for the euthanasia of Judaism. Why? Because the Jews follow commandments from outside themselves. They're not self-legislating. Wagner was notorious for his diatribes against the Jews as a threat to the nationalist fervor. Nationalism, as you know, was rising everywhere in the 19th century. Wagner, promoted this Teutonic Germanic nationalist passion. It's an inner passion, patriotism, devotion to the folk. Nietzsche, of course, people will always say to me, but he didn't like anti-Semites. It's true, because they're part of the crowd. He had contempt for anti-Semites, and he had at least as much contempt for the Jews, because similar reasons, the Jews follow what is commanded from above and not what is resolved from within through the will. So here, the emergence of modern man, this is one of the most chilling sculptures out there. Modern man being self-created man, autonomous, self-legislating, and resolute. Okay, there's no higher relation here. There's no dimension of height. There's no holiness. So how does this manifest, coming back to the Shoah, how does it manifest there? What is the most famous Nazi propaganda film, arguably? Triumph of the will, not triumph of justice, the good, spirit, truth. All of those things are determined by the will. Okay. There's no, in Nazi Germany, there is no unjust law. There's no concept of an unjust law. The law, what is lawful is whatever the Reich, the Volk, the Führer will to be lawful. Everything done to the Jews in Nazi Germany was legal. If you have seen the dramatization of the Wannsee Conference held on January 20th, 1942, convened by Reinhard Heydrich, he gathered 13 heads of German ministries to discuss the logistics of exterminating the Jews of Europe. And you can read the minutes taken by Eichmann online, and at least twice, Heydrich says, everything must be done in a legal manner. We have to engage in this mass slaughter without breaking any laws, okay? That's where the will triumphs. That's where the will triumphs. And this 8 of the 13 men at the meeting had doctorate degrees. There were 4 Einsatzgruppen, killing units. At one point or another, they all had doctorate degrees, the commanders. Anti-Semitism comes from church fathers, leaders, philosophers, intelligentsia. They exploit the rest of society, but it's articulated, conceived, implemented from the top down. There were, among the war crimes trials, were the judge's trial, the doctor's trial. Really? Maybe there should have been a professor's trial. I'm not sure. But in any case, the Nationalist Association for Jewish Lecturers meeting, headed by, in 1939, Walter Schulze, Professor Walter Schulze, says what the great thinkers of German idealism dreamed of finally comes alive, assumes reality. Never has the German idea of freedom as the autonomy of will been conceived with greater life and greater vigor than in our day. Half of the professors of philosophy in 1939 were party members. And among those professors is the economist Peter Heinz Seraphim, who, if you read Max Weinreich's collection called Hitler's Professors, published in 1946, Hitler's Professors, Seraphim is in there, he's pointing out that anti-Semitism is not about racism or ethnic bias. It's a fundamental principle, a category of thinking, a metaphysical principle, a first principle. And of course, among the most notorious of Hitler's professors is Heidegger. In May 1933, he was the rector of Freiburg University. He gave a speech called the self-assertion of the German university, the Selbstbehauptung, the assertion of the authority of the self. Okay. The self-assertion of the university is a self-assertion of the Reich, the Volk, and the Führer. And indeed, he extolled in this speech the magnificence and greatness of National Socialism. The following November, in the Freiburger Studenten Zeitung, Heidegger wrote the following. He said, the Führer himself and he alone is the present and future German reality and its law. Now, Heidegger was not stupid, and Heidegger was not coerced. One of his famous students, Karl Löwit, Jewish, went to visit at Heidegger in 1936 as Löwit was leaving Germany. And he asked Heidegger about the connection between Heidegger's philosophical thinking and his affiliation with the Nazi Party. And Heidegger said, I see in the National Socialists the historical realization of my thinking. When I was in graduate school, in a galaxy far, far away and long, long ago, Heidegger was a hot item. If you couldn't drop Heideggerian phrases at cocktail parties, you were nothing. Heidegger's very seductive. I was enamored of Heidegger, and I found out it's rumored that Heidegger was a Nazi. I said, can't be, can't be, can't be. So I started thinking, what exactly is there in his philosophy that would preclude being a Nazi? There's really nothing. And Löwit asked him about it. Heidegger himself says, this is perfectly in keeping with my philosophy. Now, fundamental to the metaphysics of the Shoah, the singularity of the Shoah, is the matter of the value of the human being, or of the other human being. This is fundamental to any understanding of humanity, of the world, reality, learning, higher learning, society, everything. What is the ground for the value, the dearness of the other human being? And you have two opposing viewpoints here in the Aryan and the Jew. And these are both mythologized figures. Nobody looks like either one of these figures. But you can see the contrast between light and darkness, purity and corruption, and so on. From the Nazi point of view, a human being has value on two counts. One is you happen to be born an Aryan, as they define that racial term. And if you're an Aryan, you take on greater depth and substance as you can bring to bear a will to power. For a Jew, what is the basis of the dearness of the human being? What's the teaching? The teaching is, first of all, that each of us is an emanation of the Creator. Through the Creator, each of us is spiritually connected to the other. Each of us has a fundamental, essential, transcendent bond with the other. Secondly, each of us comes from a single human being, from Adam. The Hebrew word for human being, Ben Adam, the child of Adam. Ben Adam. The rabbis ask, why does God begin with one and not with two? It takes two. And of course, the rabbis always have many answers to their questions, but one that I like is so that no one can say to another, my side of the family is better than your side of the family. Got to be from your side of the family because it's not from my side. Right? There's only one side. We're all bonded physically and metaphysically, each to the other, which, as you can see, is utterly antithetical to this Nazi thinking about the Aryan has no more connection to non-Aryans than you have to an insect. So this is the creation of Adam is at the foundation of a Jewish teaching and testimony to the dearness of the other human being. Now, fundamental to Nazi thinking is not race exactly, but this term Rassenseele, race soul. Those of you who teach the Holocaust to your American students have to explain that what the Nazis understood as race is not what we understand as race. It's not in American society, race is largely about color. Color is in the mix, but it's not fundamental. The Jews were white. German Jews, pretty much, were pretty white. So Alfred Rosenberg, Nazi ideologue, explains this term. He says, soul means race viewed from within. And vice versa, race is the externalization of the soul. He says, National Socialism proceeds from the avowal that blood and character, race and soul are merely different designations for the same entity. They're synonyms. Blood, character, race, soul. And he also goes on to say that the Aryan Geist, mind or spirit, is poisoned not by Jewish blood, but by Judaism, because the ism is in the blood. The ism, the teaching, the tradition is in the blood, and every Jew tests Judaism positive. Therefore, every Jew, religious, non-religious, atheist, Hasid, has to be exterminated for the sake of the purity, ultimately the redemption of humanity. The contagion is Judaism, and notice, it doesn't meet the naked eye. You have to know how to look, how to see, how to perceive. And indeed, so it has to, the project of extermination has to be total. And Mein Kampf, those of you who have had the stomach to actually read it, you'll note that Hitler says that the complete annihilation of a teaching and tradition, i.e. Judaism, has to be done through a process of extermination. So the language of extermination is already there. Early on, this published 1924, written in 22, 23, in the years going up to 1924. There can be no half measures. And there is no limiting principle. One difference between Nazis and Crusaders is that you could be a Christian in the time of the Crusades and say, hey, wait a minute, we're going too far. You can invoke your own teachings, your own scriptures. Say, it says right here. You can object without leaving the fold of Christianity. In the name of what, if you're a Nazi, do you say, we're going too far, we're killing too many Jews? You can't kill too many. It's not just mass killing. It's torture. Jean Amery, famous survivor, says that torture was the defining principle of National Socialism. He has one of the best, as one who was tortured, he has one of the best essays on tortures in a book called At the Mind's Limits. I translated the Black Book of Russian Jewry from Russian to English. Traumatizing task, and as in the process, it's a collection of eyewitness testimonies, diaries, letters, affidavits on Nazi activities in the East. And I came to the realization that what the Nazis perpetrated was not unimaginable. It was everything imaginable. The only limiting principle was will and imagination. If they could imagine it, they would do it. And it has to be ubiquitous as Satan, because the enemy is as invisible as Satan. It's the invisible wire puller. As early as 1922, Hitler told a journalist named Joseph Hell that once I'm in power, my first and foremost task will be the annihilation of the Jews, 1922. And it's debated, when did it become a policy of state in Nazi Germany, this total extermination? And my usual answer is when they thought they could do it. They always wanted to do it. But killing a people throughout Europe, read the Wannsee Conference notes, ain't easy. It's a massive project. It brings to bear all of society. All of society. Students in my Holocaust class, from no matter what their major, they can find something to write about connected to what they're studying, whether it's science, journalism, law, medicine, art, literature, philosophy, religion, all of it. And he told a friend of his named Hermann Rauschning that as Führer, his mission in life was to, quote, destroy the tyrannical God of the Jews and his life-denying 10 Commandments. We're taught by our sages that we should read the commandments not 1 through 10, not top to bottom, but from in Hebrew right to left. So Anochi Hashem, I am the Lord your God, means lo tirtzach, do not murder. The obliteration of God entails the obliteration of the prohibition. And so the extermination project was set into motion on June 22nd, 1941. This is a scene from the Einsatzgruppen. Babin Yar was famous, in the news recently. Another story on September 29th and 30th, 1941, about 33,000 Jews were murdered. It would reach 100,000 before the war was over. But Babin Yar is an infamous site. It's from the Baltic to the Black Sea. Every Jew has to be killed. I don't suppose anyone here has been to Tromsø, Norway. Tromsø, as noted here, is 217 miles north of the Arctic Circle. There were 17 Jews who lived there. Gotta go get them. The Arctic, this is not scapegoating. You don't go to the Arctic if you're looking for a scapegoat. This is killing God. How do you kill the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? You kill the one in prayer to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. As we are taught, we think we pray to God, but that's not exactly the case because the prayer itself is divine. In this scene, it's difficult to read this photograph. Yechiel Diener kept this photograph over the place where he wrote until one day his wife said, either the photograph goes or I go. But you can see that the tefillin are wrapped not as they should be around the rabbi's left arm, as if he put them on very quickly, or maybe he didn't want to wrap them properly because he'd been ordered to put this on before they shot him. It's not sure, but this is the question here, it's how do you kill God? I've suggested that God was the enemy, and sometimes I'm asked, well, did the Nazis know? Did they know they were going to kill God? Did they know about these Jewish practices of tallis and tefillin and stuff? At the top, the answer is yes. The Gestapo had a division known as Judenforschung ohne Juden, which is research into Jewish stuff without involving the Jews. They had specialists. Eichmann was in that division for a time. Eichmann studied Hebrew, Aramaic, Yiddish, the texts, so they would know. And Herman Krug is a Vilna ghetto diarist, as is Zelig Kamanovich, in his diary, Kamanovich writes, a war is being waged against the Torah and God, against the moral law and the creator of the universe. This is what is targeted for annihilation, and the annihilation of the Jewish people. I mean, they knew the lines from the Sifrei, a commentary on Deuteronomy, where God says, when you are my witnesses, I am God. When you're not my witnesses, I'm no longer God. The Nazis had a sense of this. Time is the presence of God in the realm of space, particularly the Chagim, the holy days, when the gates open up. The holy calendar was used to plan actions against the Jews. Elie Wiesel once told me we didn't have a calendar in the camp, but we knew when the holy days were because that's when they had the massive selections. Rosh Hashanah, you know, Mengele said, on this day, you think God decides who will live, who will die? No, I decide. Emanuel Ringelblum, very famous for the Oneg Shabbat circle, just simply records, the practice of torturing Jews on Yom Kippur. This is a scene of Yom Kippur in Nazi Germany. Transports to Treblinka. The big transports started rolling out of Warsaw on Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av, of course, is the anniversary of the Korban, the destruction of the temple. In his Warsaw Ghetto Diary, Scroll of Agony, Chaim Kaplan notes the day when prayer was forbidden and deemed an act of sabotage. Now think about this. Prayer is an act of sabotage and sedition. It's not, say your prayers, partner, because I'm going to blow your head off. No, I'm going to blow your head off and you must not pray. They prayed, but you get the idea. Now, this is where it gets hard. One horrific way in which God himself was targeted for annihilation, obliteration, elimination was through the targeting of the children. More than 85% of the Jewish children of Europe were murdered. If you've been to Yad Vashem and staggered through the Children's Memorial in the darkness, surrounded by 1.5 million points of light, holding on to the rail because you can't walk through there without a swoon. You'll hear the names of children, the name, the age, and the town where the child is from about every 5 or 6 seconds. It takes 3 years to go through the list. And they've identified about 1/3 by name. Elie Wiesel says it was as though the Nazi killers knew precisely what children represent to us. According to our tradition, the entire world subsists thanks to them. For example, in the Midrash, we're told that when the Babylonians, at the time of the destruction of the first temple, took away the priests and the Levites, the holy city remained holy, but when they took the children, the holy city lost its holiness. The Talmud teaches that all of creation is sustained, is held up by the breath of little children. Not by the powerful shoulders of Atlas, but by holiness, the breath of children. We're taught that only the prayers of our children reach God's ears because their lips are untainted by sin. The children are not in need of redemption. They are the source of redemption, you see. The Tikkunei Zohar, one of the Kabbalistic texts associated with Zohar, but it's separate, says that the children are the face of the Shekhinah, the divine presence. So this is a major way of killing God you render entire realms where Jews live empty of children. Diener says, in the ghetto, there was no children. There were small Jews and big Jews, but you couldn't tell them apart. Children were old, and old men were as helpless as children. George Salton, another memoir writer, survivor, said that he went for 6 years without seeing a single Jewish child. There were transports of children. Theresienstadt or Terezin was one of the camps where children were gathered for transport. Typically, there were no children in camps, right? In Auschwitz, they were sent straight to the gas chamber with their mothers, if their mother was with them. Mengele said it would be inhumane to kill the children without also killing their mothers. So from Theresienstadt, you have this painting of a children's deportation. Transports consisting entirely of children. Sarah Nonnberg-Schittig, in her memoir, she was in the women's camp, records the following. The women's camp, if you've been to Birkenau, you'll know, is right across the unloading platform where the trains came in. She says, suddenly the stillness was broken by the screaming of children, a scream repeated 1,000 times in a single word, mama. A scream that increased in intensity every second, enveloping the whole camp. Our lips parted without our being conscious of what we were doing, and a scream of despair tore out of our throats. At the end, everything was enveloped in death and silence. Mama. Indeed, one of the defining features of the Holocaust, another of a singularity, is the systematic assault on the mother. If the crime of the Jew is being in this world, there's no criminal more heinous than the one who brings the Jew into this world. I knew Yechiel Diener when I have lectures just on him. His one memoir, his first memoir, he actually wrote a second book that's like a memoir. It's called Shiviti, from the Psalms, Shiviti Adoshim Lenegedi Tamid. I place the O Lord before me always. And he gave me, at the time, the manuscript copy of the English translation, and I was working on his novels. He said, the novels are about Auschwitz. This is Auschwitz. The one thing, one of his visions in Shiviti that appears in Shiviti, in the memoir, that is not in the novels, is a vision of his mother being taken to the gas chamber. That's a defining feature of Auschwitz, his ability to try to, he who couldn't say what Auschwitz is. And of course, the assault on the mother is an assault on the one who first utters your name, who first lets you know you're someone. The one with whom your first and most profound human relationship begins. In the camp, how do you kill the soul? You kill the soul by killing the human to human relationship. You kill the soul by killing the here I am for you. The soul doesn't live in us, the soul lives between us. The soul draws its breath. The neshama draws its neshima from the between space of human relation. In Night, when Eliezer is looking for his father in Buchenwald, you find one of the most chilling lines in Holocaust literature where one of the inmates says, what are you doing? You shouldn't be trying to find food for your father. Well, don't you know where you are? This is a concentration camp. And he says, here, there are no fathers. There are no sons. There are no mothers, sisters, brothers, mothers, etc. This is each of us lives and dies alone. Indeed, Primo Levi wrote in Survival in Auschwitz that in Auschwitz, everyone is ferociously alone. Levi had has one of the most profound insights on a singular Nazi creation, the Musselman. So on page 92 of Survival in Auschwitz, where he says the Musselmänner are, he says, the backbone of the camp, an anonymous mass continually renewed and always identical of non-men who march and labor in silence, the divine spark dead within them, already too empty to really suffer. One hesitates to call them living, one hesitates to call their death, death. There is no natural death in Auschwitz, in the Holocaust concentrationary universe. There's no natural, there's no death, there's no burial. If you saw Son of Saul, about Sonderkommando, the commando that worked in the crematoria, it's about one of the men, they were almost all Jews, finds the body of a child from the gas chamber. He survived the gas chamber, but died right after. And he goes to great lengths to bury the child. He's not trying to save a life, he's trying to save a death. Where there's no death, no mourning, no burial of the dead, where we have no ethical relation to the dead, we have no relation to the living. So this is the image of what? The Musselman. It's an image of the soul of the Nazi, I would say. And it has implications for how we understand a human being. Primo Levi's memoirs say, Questo è un uomo. Is this a human? Elie Wiesel famously said, at Auschwitz, not only man died, but the very idea of man. So the singularity of the Shoah has universal implications for humanity, it seems to me. And there's, I'm about to wrap it up here. There's another singular phenomenon that's graphically singular about the Shoah. Some of you are old enough to remember perhaps April 26, 1986, Chernobyl. There was an accident at the nuclear power plant. One day, a cloud of radioactive material went up one chimney, cast to the winds. Radiation levels in Montana, Arizona were elevated a couple of weeks later. One chimney, one day. In the Shoah, we're talking not one chimney or one day, we're talking dozens of chimneys that cast the ashen body of Israel to the winds for 1,000 days. Those of you who have been to Auschwitz-Birkenau know that you're walking on at least 3 feet of Jewish remains on the ground. So there's a constant rain of ash. These remains cast to the wind cover the earth from which we harvest our bread. They abide in the bread that we place in our mouths. They're in us. Arnold Lustig, Holocaust survivor, novelist, filmmaker, says this in one of his novels. He says, these ashes would be indestructible and immutable. They would not burn up into nothingness because they themselves were remnants of fire. No one living would ever be able to escape them. These ashes will be contained in the breath and expression of every one of us. And the next time anybody asks what the air he breathes is made of, he will have to think about these ashes. They will be contained in books which haven't been written and will be found in the remotest regions of the earth where no human foot has ever trod. No one will be able to get rid of them. They will be the nagging ashes of the dead who died in silence. They nag us with a question, with what I think is the Jewish question, the question for which the Nazis sought a final solution. And it's the first question put to the first human. So where are you? Ayeka. It's in Hebrew, the Hebrew word ayeka is from echa. I mean, it's a cry of anguish. It's not that God doesn't know. God is suffering. God is in pain. It's a question that echoes in the two questions put to the firstborn of the first human, Cain, who was asked, "Where's your brother? And what have you done?" The bloods of your brother cry out to me. Bloods, plural. Genocide is always entails the slaughter of more than the ones who lie in the earth or go up in smoke. Our task as a human being, our humanity, the humanity that we're reminded of and don't want to be reminded of, lies in an infinite responsibility, which entails moving into a radical vulnerability to and for the sake of another. It lies in answering, where's your brother? What have you done? And answering, Hineni, here I am for you. When the prophets and patriarchs are summoned, they don't reply, huh, or what. They say, Hineni, here I am for you. It's a movement toward the one who asks. A movement, here I am offering myself up for you. This is a singular aspect of the Shoah that has a universal implication for how we understand each of us, Jews, non-Jews, human beings. How do we understand who we are as human beings? How do we understand our relation to the other human being? What is the ground of the sanctity of the other human being? What is my responsibility? These questions come into profound collisions in the time of the Shoah. Thanks so much. Questions? Yes, ma'am.
I had the chance yesterday to attend the lecture by Father Dubois.
I haven't, but I know him and I've had conversations with him, yes.
So I would like to come juxtapose the message of your beautiful, profound lecture and what Father Dubois gave us last night. It seems to me, it's not only that several issues come to mind. First, sorry. So several things come to mind. You highlight, and I think correctly, the uniqueness of the Shoah. But in a sense, what he was telling us last night is precisely the opposite, that every person is capable of doing what the Nazis did. And in a sense, all humanity, without even the metaphysical background or the underpinning of the Christian tradition, is capable of doing what the Nazis did. So I would like you to respond to that. That would be question number one. Question number two for me is, which is a well-known question in Jewish studies, of course, if the Shoah is so unique, what's the goal, what's the purpose, what's the capacity to do comparative study of the Holocaust with other genocides? So those are the two questions.
Well, thank you. Those are excellent questions. The idea that every human is capable of it, I don't see to be contrary to the singularity of it. I mean, it's part of the singularity lies in that message. I mean, the first child, if the human being is a Ben Adam, child of Adam, Cain is the first child of Adam, who was a murderer. When Yehiel Diener collapsed during the trial, when he was revived, they asked him, what happened? You okay? You okay? He said, I was looking at Eichmann, staring at Eichmann, and I realized he's not a monster. He's not a devil. He's a man like me. And he collapsed under that realization. So the Jews are singled out to be witnesses to humanity, to say to all of humanity that they're chosen, to say to all of humanity, every human being is chosen for a task that no other human can perform by God. It's a difficult assignment. The assignment to say to each soul that every soul is indispensable to all of creation, with regard to a responsibility that no one else can meet, and responsibility that's always difficult to meet. So I think I tried to indicate that the singularity is tied to a universality. It's not either, is it singular or is it universal? I think it's both. As for comparative, it's an excellent question. Why compare something with something that's incomparable? And I have students who do this. I'm working with a student now who's writing on the Assyrian genocide. I'm working with a student writing on Nanking, and they want to make whole connections to Holocaust. But the value of comparative study, in my view, lies as much in bringing out differences as it does in bringing out similarities. To compare means looking for not just sameness, but difference. So that the aim is to understand each item of comparison better, right? One of the singularities of the Holocaust is that it's an assault, in my view, on the very teaching, the very testimony that makes other horrors horrific and not just matters of academic curiosity. It's that I would say the metaphysics of the holiness of the human comes to bear in all of these things we've been discussing here. Without that, like I said, it's just academic curiosity. Got nothing to do with me, right? Then I become like Adam. I go into hiding when God asks me, where are you? Other questions? Thank you. Jen.
When you're talking about the singularity, could it be that it's the singularity of the actions and not the singularity of the men or the man committing the murders or committing the crimes? It's the singularity of the action as a whole versus one single man.
Well, I don't think the actions are unique. People get shot, beaten, burned, gassed, tortured. It's like what Diener said, that's not Auschwitz. I can't say what it is. The singularity lies in what is non-representable, what is ineffable. It lies in the assault on the Holy One, which eludes representation. The assault on the Torah. Hitler, my aim will be to get rid of the God of the Jews and his life-denying 10 commandments. It's an assault on the commandments. That's a dimension. I mentioned several dimensions, but that's one of the dimensions of the Shoah that to a large extent, sets it apart from others. But look, each genocide has its defining singular features, right? The Hutus are not trying to kill the Tutsis because of a Torah of some kind. Something else is going on, something that we must study, we must examine to learn, to understand not only other atrocities, but ourselves as well. That's the hard part. There's no studying these things innocently. We can't study them without implication. And I think this is why Another one, you know, I don't know if it's singular, but a feature of the Holocaust is the denial phenomenon. Denial there's a spectrum of denial. I was the first one to teach a course on the Holocaust at two different universities, not where I am now. And I remember, you know, the faculty meeting, which, you know, the faculty meeting, what are you going to teach? What are you going to teach? What are you going to teach? So it's, well, I'm gonna do a seminar on the Holocaust again. One of my colleagues said, what? You're teaching the Holocaust again? Can't we get over it? It's all people hear about. We're tired of it. It happened so long ago. Nobody says, oh, I'm teaching a course on the Civil War. Again? You're teaching the Civil War. It happened so long ago. Can't we get over it? Why? My students tell me, their friends say, why are you taking that? Why do you want to? It's so depressing. This is another, while I'm talking pedagogy here, something else that those of us who teach these things encounter is the danger of slipping into a very dark abyss. You start dreaming about being inside the sealed train or in the camp. But and students will come to you, those of you who teach this, and start crying in your office. But the point, as I try to remind them and remind myself, is not to fall into this gravitational pull of despair and darkness. No, it's to come to a deeper realization of the infinite dearness of the other human being, the infinite responsibility that devolves upon me, a responsibility that increases with each response, a debt that increases in the measure that it's paid, without that reckoning, what would life be? Nothing, empty. That would be the abyss. So there is a certain paradoxical way to find something to rejoice in as much as life is sacred. Life means something. It matters. What I say to my neighbor, the after you, opening a door for somebody, has profound implications. And that's what the point is, seems to me. The point is coming to a realization of what to fear for, what to love, what to die for. Yes.
Psychiatrist and survivor of 6 concentration camps in Bosnia. I'm presenting after you. So I really like your comment at the end when you said there is never enough teaching about genocide and Holocaust. And there are several reasons for that. And one of the main is those who committed crime against humanity and genocide and Holocaust. One of the major goals they have, one of the major goals is make you quiet.
Yes.
And that happens, and your question is that happens with sexual abuse of young women in the families, same story. It's universal. It's not only universal for seen in Holocaust or genocide in Rwanda or Bosnia or now in Ukraine. It is universal element, psychological element of a trauma that people perpetrator, they want you to be quiet. Do they have anything else in the mind? No, they want you to be quiet, not to talk about it. Yeah. But what are we doing? We are teaching, presenting, talking about it to at least get one person that will not be same as every other aggression what we have inside, not to do crime against humanity. I will never do any crime against humanity, and nobody will ever force me to do it. I would die so nicely and easily before I do anything to another human being, because I learn about the psychological element of other people suffering.
Very good. Thank you. Yeah.
There's one more question online.
Okay. Okay.
This is from Rob Chirico, and he asks, why do you feel the lessons of the genocide from the Holocaust are still being ignored by nations today with what is going on in Ukraine?
There are nations who ignore or deny, as a nation, deny the Holocaust. Iran, for example. There are nations that de-Judaize the Holocaust. But the connection with Ukraine, there are nations who, this makes me nuts, who say, we stand with you, Ukraine, and yet they remain silent about so much. They want to be silent. It's a war against memory and testimony, as you point out. I think the silence, the turning away, the pretending to stand with a country while you're way, way, way on the sidelines, that's a way of hiding, as Adam hides. It's our default position. Where are you? Where's your brother? What have you done? What does Adam say? I was afraid, so I hid. Because, as suggested, saying something puts us in a position of vulnerability. The truth is usually not something people want to hear. Things that implicate me in my responsibility, I don't really want to hear. My wife does this to me all the time, but I need her. She's my Ezer Kenegdo. She's the helper against me that way. But Ukraine is the current ongoing case in which, as we struggle to get information out. There are all kinds of challenges to get information out. But so as it suggests, so much of it goes unresponded to. So I'm not sure what more to say about that. Thank you.
Thank you. And then there's another question from Brad Poss. Would you argue that the logistics, volume of victims, the highly organized system of murder, the widespread touting of pseudoscientific theories of the Shoah were unique or singular?
No, the tactics, the methods, the systematic nature of it is not unique. What is unique is what's, in my view, the metaphysics of it, what's driving it. It's the assault on the soul. It's not enough. It wasn't enough to kill the Jews. The Muslim man was a calculated creation. The Muslim man is not just someone who's the victim of starvation, exposure, exhaustion, brutality, the rest of it. The Muslim man is a Jew who has likely seen his family murdered before his eyes or her eyes. A Jew who's a woman whose hands have participated in killing infants who were born in the camp in order to save mothers. Who's been forbidden to pray, forbidden to have mezuzahs, forbidden to bury the dead. Burying the dead in Judaism, like many traditions, is a very serious matter. That goes into the creation of a Muslim man, nameless, silent, unresponsive, utter isolation. This is what the Nazi is making of the Jew. But as I suggested, is actually an image of the soul of the Nazi. The soul suffers what it inflicts. I am dehumanized in my effort to dehumanize my neighbor. I lose my own humanity. I'll just tell you, there's a story from the Warsaw Ghetto. A young woman with two little children, was approached by Nazis going to take her children. She starts begging him, don't, please don't take my children. He looks at her and says, oh, all right, I'll tell you what, if you can guess which of my eyes is a glass eye, you can have your children. She immediately says, the right eye. Why, yes, how could you tell? She says, it looks more human than the other one. The soul suffers what it inflicts. I think I'm about done.
Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking
Thank you.
Professor Patterson.